All right. Good Wednesday morning, or I should say late morning. So I haven't been on last Sunday because I had something happen that I haven't had happen for a long time. I got a really weird viral cold, and I've been using some herbs and things, and I got rid of it. So it's slowly but surely leaving. So, and again, that was right on the new moon. We just had a new moon yesterday at 5:26 a.m. And that always brings a shift and a new direction. So, the big thing is that we've got the thing I've been talking about a long time is Alcyon is moving to a conjunction, or I should say Uranus. Uranus is moving to a conjunction of the fixed star Alcyon. And it's, as we speak today, only 15 minutes of degree arc away. And it should be exact right about the 29th, which is just 7 days from now. Now, again, I've been talking a lot about this. Every time Uranus goes over the Pleiades, we see world disruption. Again, World War I, if we go back, Civil War, prior to that, Revolutionary, prior to that, we had Black Plagues, all kinds of crazy stuff in Europe. So it's interesting where we're at right now. We see Hamas and Israel still firing at each other. Yeah, there's a peace accord, but it don't sound like peace to me when the bullets are flying over everyone's heads. Secondly, we've got Russia and we've got Ukraine. And, Trump has gotten the oil to stop the flow into India. But, like I've been saying forever, there's a lot more going on with the Ukrainian-Russian issue than I think we're being told. That rabbit hole goes quite deep. A lot of mysterious stuff on that. So we're going to see what happens because many people have been listening on the internet to different sources. And my opinion is the owners want war. They want to see dissension so they can get more power. And this is, the forces that are underplaying here. And again, we saw the meeting with Zelensky and Trump and all that, where the possibility of tomahawks and other weaponry, I'm sure, would be introduced over there. That sounds like an escalation to me. So let's hope Uranus going over Alcyon doesn't escalate things. So far as I see it, let's hope that it doesn't happen. But just remember, expect the unexpected as these energies happen. And remember, once it crosses, it's going to go forward. Actually, no, this is retrogradation. And then it's going to station and go direct and come back and hit this coming spring. So this is powerful. There's no question that we're in the middle of a very precarious time right now. And again, follow the money, right? That's always the issue here is the money is the backdoor funding of what we see that fuels this dissension and the global, scale, if you will. Now, another thing people have been talking about is this AI Atlas. And there's no question it's doing some very unusual things. I had a clip that I was going to play, but I don't know what happened to it. But I want to make an announcement here, too. This coming Sunday, I'm going to have Michael Schratt on, and he is amazing. I went to the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. I had shown some pictures from his presentation, my last podcast, and he's going to be on with me live this coming Sunday. And we will be timely on this one. It'll be 10 a.m. this Sunday, so don't miss it because I don't usually have guests on, and I'm going to start trying to do that more. And he is just an encyclopedia on UAP, UFO, and government interaction with secret projects. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll bet we won't even have enough time to cover even this much of what he knows and what he can bring to the table. But so don't miss that. That's coming up this Sunday. So it'll be a lot of fun. So anyhow, a lot of people are saying here, one person saying, Val saying, praying for peace and cool heads to prevail. Yeah. Cool heads. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes that is not the case. And you look at these agendas and you look at the forces behind it, it makes you really wonder just how much good and evil is at play here. Because thank God that literally we have been staved off from anyone using exceedingly powerful weaponry like nuclear and other things. Of course, they did use a little bit back in COVID, didn't they? But let's hope that doesn't happen anymore. So, yeah, someone's mentioning here Uranus and Alcyon coming together right. Three Eye Atlas is reacting to perihelion. And that's exactly right. Glad Mary brought that up because that's actually happening almost on the exact same day, which is October 29th. So there's a lot of theories about this Three Eye Atlas. I haven't looked at it much lately. I've been really busy catching back up here after I got sick. And one of the things that I get is it's definitely not positive. There was a moon conjunct Saturn in an interrogation that I cast on that. And that didn't look like it was in the best interest of humanity. And again, there's all kinds of theories that this might be a ship. It might be some, coordinated vessel that's going around. And even the scientists are saying once it comes out perihelion, they're going to see if it comes out around the sun like that. And if it's acting differently, they know it is an intelligently directed craft rather than just some piece of rock that's rocketing through the space. So we'll see. I think there's so much stuff that goes on. When you really look at, and this will be fun when I have Michael on this Sunday, stuff that I've seen, stuff that so many other people have reported. I go back to years ago. It's probably like 20, 25 years ago. I was sitting on top of a mountain watching Area 51 and seeing craft just maneuver. They weren't banking. They were maneuvering and coming down. Didn't act like airplanes to me. So again, when we look at something like this Three Eye Atlas, that's as big as it is and doing what it is, it's going to be interesting to see the outcome because I get, we'll probably be okay. I don't get it's going to hit Earth or anything like that, but you never know what these kinds of things are really doing. And I am going to do something I haven't done for many years. I'm going to take a very long lens with an 8K camera. It's super high resolution. And I'm going to display some of the craft that I've seen coming in and out of the moon and other planets, the moon particularly. I mean, I used to do this back in Tucson. It was amazing the amount of craft that I saw coming in and out. I mean, I was just like, am I seeing this? And then I would play it back 3 times. And I have that footage somewhere. It's buried, but now I have a camera that's much, much higher resolution with clarity. And we've got some really collimated lenses that I'll be able to show some of this, which is really fascinating stuff. And again, this parallels what the heck are we in here? We're certainly in a matrix that is interacting with our consciousness and our awareness. So and I talk about that a lot. By the way, I want to tell you a quick story here. One of my favorite go-to types of astrology has always been interrogation, or you could call it prashna in India. And again, I'm surprised a lot of astrologers don't use it that much. It is probably one of the most formidable tools any astrologer can have in their toolbox. And what is it? It's not your birth chart. It's not your sun sign. It is literally casting a chart for the moment that you need to know something. Well, here's a good one. It was a few days ago. Camille comes in, oh my God, I lost my bank card, right? And I said, okay, all right. And she goes, well, I don't know where the heck it is. She goes, well, here's the problem. I'm going to have to go to the bank, cancel it. I have to get all these new things registered to the card, which is a pain in the neck. We all got this, right? The automatic debts every month, right? Or payments. So she says, where is it? Well, I wasn't feeling good at the time. I said, well, oh my God, give me a minute. I'll get up and cast the chart and take a look at it. So I did. I actually did it on my phone at first, which isn't a very good astrology program, but at least it logs my interrogations, right? When I want to know something. And I got my son asking me stuff all the time, and clients where they'll say, hey, what about this? And I'll cast it, and then I can go look at it in depth on the computer on my other programs, because interrogation takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of study. So anyways, I cast the chart, and she's all freaked out, absolutely convinced she lost it. She's running around the stores, throwing things behind her, trying to find it, which, we'd all be like that, right? So I looked at the chart, and I ended up looking at prashna for this one. And I do that a lot, where I'll use the ancient traditional methods in tropical astrology, which I like a lot. And I also flank it with prashna, which is sidereal. Now, people might say, well, that's crazy. Well, I actually find that they support each other in their unique methodologies. And the first thing I noticed, well, she'll probably get it back. And the second thing I noticed, it's somewhere by a doorway, and it's in the northeast portion of the house, right? So I told her that. She goes, oh my God. Okay. So she's running around. She goes out in the garage, and apparently she sprays her hair out there in the garage because the hairspray is really nasty smelling, right? So, and she had it up on the shelf above the hairspray. And she said, I would have never found that had the chart not said that. And, I could tell you so many stories. This is one I can tell because, it's a family member, but I could go on and on over the years, literally all the way back to the 1980s, doing interrogations. And people say to me, well, how can that be? And I'm like, I know. It proves the universe is an interactive consciousness. And it also shows the ancient astrology is superior. It really is, insofar as the way it looks at astrology. You see, because you're literally, in this case, you're not asking about your cat or your dog or anything. You're looking for a bank card, right? So it immediately, the consciousness or the need, you could say the common sense need that you have going on, directs me to look at the proper houses and what they call signifactors. And, the skill set is to extract what the heck are you looking for and what does the chart say? So it was really interesting. And, I've actually had gold miners hire me to come out. This is a great story. Speaking of that place, Area 51, this was about 20 something years ago, just north of Pahrump. And this guy has a gold mine up there, a couple claims, right? And he says, Jeff, we know we got gold here, right? So they're running around with these things called ranger tells. I don't know if anybody's heard of them, but a ranger tell is a device that uses some type of radar scanning into the ground. And you can detect different metals, right? In fact, many of the geology companies have this stuff for oil and gas and all kinds of stuff. So it's becoming a real prominent technology, right? So he's running around. He said, wow, we think we got gold right here, right? So he said, what does astrology say? So I cast a chart and I said, you know what? I think you got gold here, right? And I said, it looks like a pretty fair amount of it and substantial. And again, you look at the rulerships and all this stuff in astrology, and it gives you that language, right? So I said, but it's fairly deep. I said, it's not right on the surface. And the guy in the ranger tells going, oh, no. It's only 3 feet deep. And I'm looking at the chart going, no, I think it's probably down there the better part of 20 feet, right? And, he's arguing with me. I said, okay, well, whatever, right? The bottom line is we got gold here, right? And then 5 minutes later, he looks over, he goes, you know what? He says, I think the chart's right because I'm looking, he said, I thought it was feet. It's meters. It was 3.8 meters, which is, do the math, 3.28 feet per meter ended up being pretty close to what the astrology said. Now he's spending a fortune to get that out of there, and that's the problem with mining. And, people often say to me, why are the gems so expensive? Well, when you look at what it takes to get machinery and manpower in there and do this stuff in extraction, it's a lot of work. It's not simple. It's not like the old movies, where you just look here, I found some gold. You can, but to get to substantial mining, it often is a lot of work. But it was interesting how the interrogation astrology lined up with a very expensive piece of equipment. So, and I've had so many instances. I've had other instances too, where I told people, you got no gold here, and they didn't. So, and they dug. So anyways, a lot of fun stuff. And again, I'm trying to, let me put the comments on the screen here if I can do that. If it allows me to do that. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, good. So I can see them kind of going by. So a lot of people are putting out good comments, and I'm trying to pay a little bit more attention on that. So someone's saying, what are your thoughts on the lunar wave and the, what is this? The Crow 777 orb in the chemtrail footage? I don't know. That one, I don't know. I know the chemtrails, oh my God, that we thought that they were, with the government shutdown, going to not be so prominent. Well, we saw them firing back up here the other day. I don't know where they're at today, but I know they've been hard at it again. And you look at these chemtrails, it talks, I mean, I can't imagine how much money it takes to push this stuff. There was a guy in Los Angeles, LAX, probably 20 years ago, who had found all these tanks and wiring in commercial airliners. They were doing it back in commercial airliners at that time. They've stopped that now. Now they got their own fleet. But he had reported it, and he was adamant that those tanks and wiring shouldn't have been in there. And he got 3 days without pay. And he was told that if he didn't shut his mouth, he was going to get permanent no pay. He'd be fired. So, you see the power that is behind this whole program of chemtrails. But I don't know that I fully understand your question here. But my thoughts are, clearly they're doing something here that is, I hear it's weather control. I also hear that there's population control in that too. So there's a lot of different theories. There's been a lot of smart people who've been out there analyzing what could be in this stuff, not just barium, but a lot of other things. So, it's very, very interesting what's going on. So anyways, says someone saying viral cold or germ warfare. I almost wondered, I was able to combat this with a lot of good herbs. And I've also tried methylene blue. And it's interesting. They say when you take methylene blue, if you don't urinate blue, that means it's really working in the body. Well, I got to tell you, I've taken it now for probably 3 or 4 days, and I'm not urinating blue. So it's doing something. And, you often wonder, targeted things like that aren't possible, and they certainly are. But anyhow, so I wanted to bring up also, too, that the government shutdown, and I had, that's been a big question a lot of people have been putting to me. And my opinion is it's not going to shut down. It's not going to start up right away. They're going to keep standing off. And this is interesting because, Trump and the other guy, Voight, they're just cutting programs like crazy right now and shutting down the mechanisms that are backdoor funding our destruction. And if it goes past 61 days, all those terminations become permanent, not just temporary. So this is some pretty interesting stuff that's about to happen here. And we'll see what happens. I get it's going to run out farther and probably exceed the first longest shutdown, which to my understanding was the Trump administration's first pass back in, I think it was 2017 or something like that. So, or 2018, I can't remember the year. But yeah, I think this one is still going to keep running, and we'll see what happens here. So it will settle, but I think it's going to keep going on. And it looks like it's going to get more heated here from everything I can see. So we'll see where this all goes. But a lot of people are mentioning the Uranus Alcyon thing here. And, just to put this back on the screen, you can see here, Alcyon is one of the 7 sisters. And again, the 7 sisters is that ancient legend about how, they were put into the underworld, and there's many different versions, but it was basically to protect them is one of the things that they had mentioned. And quite interesting, because when you look at that, that was the story of Atlas, who held up the world, right? Remember that one? So interesting stuff here, how some of these old legends tend to have a lot of physical existence to them. And again, many people are talking about this. And I think, again, we're Uranus is going to station, I think it's somewhere in February. And what'll happen is then it's going to come back over this whole area. So we are in a powerful time here. And again, I keep saying, I think the owners really truly do want, and when we look at who are these people, and again, I've said it is a battle between the new one world order, if you will, and the nationalists. And I think at times here they really clash. And right now they're really clashing because we're seeing a movement towards nationalism. And I believe, whether you like Orange Man or hate Orange Man, I don't care. I don't want to get into politics. But I think there's a movement right now to make the United States become sovereign and reignite its mineral, energy, and industrial base. And I tell you what, I think it better, because if it doesn't, we're going to be at the behest of China. And I don't think that's going to happen. And this new deal just signed with Australia is a big movement. And I'm hearing even steel mills here in the United States are now converting over to precious and rare metal processing. So there's a lot of changes going on here. Give this time. I'd say in another year or so, we're going to see a lot of changes here. It just takes time. And, there's a lot of things going on with these tariffs. And I think we're going to see a lot of trouble here, particularly as these midterm elections come in. And we'll be looking at that more, but this is related to the Uranus and, of course, the Alcyon and the Pleiades. So, and we've also got this Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's going to kick in here right in February. What does that possibly mean? Well, reality structures as we know them dissolving and new ones coming in. So this, again, is probably one of the rarest conjunctions I've seen. And, I have to say, again, I really love ancient astrology, because if you look at the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, the Greeks, there is a body of knowledge that came up out of that is so profound in ancient astrology. And a lot of that is to do with interrogation, electional astrology, and also mundane worldly astrology. There's a text that exists, and it's probably the only one the scholars can put their fingers on. It's the only one I've seen. It's called Yavan Jataka. It's a strange word, and it has been disputed by many of the scholars as to, did this come from the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, and the Chaldeans, or did it come from the Vedas in the East? But one thing's for sure, that text seems to show there was a lot of correspondence with the world of the Eastern Vedic Nadi astrology systems, and Chinese as well, into the kind of, you could say, birthplace of humanity, which is one they say is the birthplace. But I think when we look at Tartaria and other things, that could be disputed as well, couldn't it? But what's interesting is that text, Yavan Jataka, also discusses in depth the magic of interrogation, prashna, and horary astrology. I actually have a little text here. This is one of my more favorite texts. This is actually a book. I bind them because I use them a lot. But this is a great text. It is probably one of my favorites. See if I can get it in focus here. It's called The Beginning of Wisdom. And in the Aramaic, that stands for Reshma Hokmah. Hokmah means wisdom. And what's so profound about this is it was written in the 11th century. Am I saying that right? Actually, it was written in the 1100s. So some people would say that's the 12th century. But this was written in about 1148 AD in Spain by someone named Rabbi Ibn Ezra. And, I always get the chastisements from some of the religious folks where they say, well, astrology is the work of the devil. Well, Ibn Ezra is probably one of the most prominent commentators on biblical commentary and the Psalms. He's all over it. Just look, pick up your Bible. You'll see it in the Old Testament. Ibn Ezra. It says Izra is what you'll see. He's not the only one, but he's certainly a prominent one. And he was carted around all over Europe by kings and queens. They really desired to have him come in, and generals too, because they wanted to ask interrogations. He probably wrote some of the most definitive stuff on electional astrology, medical astrology, interrogation astrology, and natal astrology. Here, these two books here, I'll show you back here. these are critical translations out of Israel that were just done a number of years ago. I think this is probably about 10 years ago. And I got these. What a critical translation is, a very detailed look with notations as to what he said and what he didn't say. And the interesting thing about Ibn Ezra is he wrote so much. He was literally brought around to these different countries. He primarily resided in Spain. But you got to figure this is the 1100s. Okay, so you weren't jumping on Southwest Airlines or Pan America. You were jumping either in a buggy or a horse or on a horse and hoofing it to wherever you had to go. And this could take weeks or months sometimes to traverse these places. And he left a body of work that was so profound. And there's another book that he wrote. This is another critical translation called The Book of Reasons. But I have to say, if you're an astrologer or you're interested in some real astrology, go get The Beginning of Wisdom. This was actually translated by Miriam Epstein and annotated by Robert Hand. And I remember when they came out with this. This is quite a few years ago. I think this came out 1998. And I remember I had a brief conversation with Robert Hand about it. And I said, well, what's your opinion of this? That's the most accurate interrogation astrology I've ever used. And I have to agree. And I integrated this into my practice. It's, going to be 28 years now. And it's going to be 30 in just 2 years by, 2028, because this came out in 1998. And profound, absolutely profound. It actually shows the sigils of planets here. I'll show you. I mean, this is ancient astrology, and this will be a little hard to see, but there's actually, you can see here some of my notations in here, but this a little hard to see, but you can see it. See, these are glyphs that are traced in what they call double acrostic squares of the Aramaic and the Hebrew that represent the angelic name of that planet. And when you get into the old ancient astrology, you start getting into archangels, angels, spirits, and intelligences. Can't make this stuff up. And this gets into the magic of creation. And when I say magic, I'm talking divine magic, and also the 72 angels in Exodus, which are known as the Shem Hemiforish. This is deep stuff, and you can't make this stuff up. And what we're not just dealing with, a bunch of planets and stars out there that are just rocks. I really believe, and some say they're projections, right? But I can tell you one thing, they sure seem to be interacting with human consciousness and the events here on Earth. Again, I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This might be the true matrix, and I really believe that it is. And I have to tell you, there is a system in Vedic astrology that's absolutely profound, because they, as I had mentioned many, many times, let's see if I can find the slide here, they actually call the planets graha. I put this up before, but I'll do it again. Graha is a strange word in Tamil and Sanskrit that actually means planet, but it also means seizer or grasper of the aura. And, a lot of folks have said to me, well, we're in a matrix and there's mind control and all this. Well, I would tend to come back to, it certainly seems to be supported that our lower conscious mind is forming in a matrix that causes us to become conscious. And it's lack of that I believe keeps us reincarnating down here in not too pleasant of ways. And they also say many advanced souls will come back here. And these are things that keep the, you could say, the vehicle in the lanes is one way to put it, or you could say creation going forward. So that's why it's very interesting to study these ancient texts. And again, when you think about how can someone ask a question and you can cast a chart? And, the critics will say, yeah, but, what if everybody asks a question? Well, everybody's not sitting in the same place, are they? See, interrogation astrology is specifically location dependent, you see? So if somebody was asking in Europe or someone was asking somewhere else, that consciousness is happening there. Now, prashna, it actually casts it right where the person is, but interrogation from the East or not the East, I'm sorry, the West, which is again, I call it Egyptian astrology and Babylonian and Chaldean, because I think it is. That's my opinion of where it really came up out of. But, or they certainly perfected it, I'll say that, from everything we can see. And they use where the astrologer's located. So this is fascinating, interesting stuff. And you just can't make this up. And, again, I've seen it thousands and thousands of times to be precisely accurate. The only time I have ever not seen it to give me an accurate answer is if I interpreted it wrong. And a lot of times, interrogation astrology is very easy. You can just get the answer right away. Like the moon's going into some crazy thing, right off the bat, the answer is probably going to be no or yes based on its condition. But it gets tricky. And here's where the rabbit hole really gets interesting. I get multiple questions, particularly I've had things like people in lawsuits, estates, etc. Well, my cousin's doing this, my uncle's doing that. And wow, I mean, you can actually see through the complex interactions of the design of this ancient astrology, a lot of things about a lot of people. And you can see if someone loves you, hates you. You can see if they're skilled. You can see if they're, talented or they're inept at what they do. And you go, well, how could that be? How could a person cast a chart and get that kind of information back? Pretty astounding. And I have to say, after probably interrogation astrology really came on my radar screen a little over 40 years ago. And because it's 2025 going on 26, right? So it was right in the early 80s is when I really started dialing into, wow, this is pretty interesting to be able to cast a chart and see whether or not something that someone's asking about will either come to pass or what have you. And I mean, you can ask anything under the sun. I've had people say, where's my cat? Well, you'll never see it again. Well, why? Well, the sixth house is pets and animals, and it looks like I got hit by a car. It's saddening to tell someone that, but that's what the chart said. Well, guess what? He never saw his cat again. So, and you can do this with lost items. You can do it with business things, basically anything under the sun. Relationships, I use it constantly. Well, does he love me? Well, you look at the chart, you say yes or no based on what's going on. A lot of times people find out the chart shows them information that they didn't know that really does help that relationship. Yeah, she does or he does love you, but you're not communicating, right? You can see so much interesting stuff about this. And, I get a lot of business clients who Jeff, what do you think we should take this course of action? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Cast a chart. Well, it says it looks pretty good, or it says no, it doesn't. So it's interesting. I could sit here and tell story after story after story after story about how interestingly accurate it is. And again, can't make this stuff up. And even the critics have to say, well, I've had a lot of clients. They'll just call me because somebody else told them to call me. Say, hey, call this guy and see if he can help you out with this particular situation, whatever it is, right? And I can tell they don't believe anything I'm telling them, right? And I always try not to believe anything I'm telling them either. I just do my job and look at the chart. You just look at the details. And what was so fascinating is, I had one guy hang up. He says, yeah, I don't know how that could ever be. Then he calls me back up. I don't know, 2-3 weeks later, he says, I can't believe it. He fell in love with the secretary and wanted to tell his wife. And then what happened was I told him, don't do it. I says, because she's going off with somebody else, the secretary. And he said, you're full of crap. I said, okay, I'm full of crap. Whatever. That's what the chart says, right? And calls me back. He said, what is this, black magic? I said, no. I said, that's what the chart said. And he says, I can't believe it. She went and married a guy in Ohio. I said, I know. I said, it's amazing how accurate it is. And that's what the chart said. I said, she's going with somebody else. So I could go on and on and on. It's so much fun to look at this. And I enjoy it too, because it's fast. It's fast. You can just get a read. And a lot of times it'll tell you what you don't want to hear. And I always say common sense and logic needs to be applied to this. Like you can't use it to trick people. Or I have had people in the past want to do nefarious things, like they want to get over on someone or something. And I won't get involved in that because it's bad karma. But it's been used that way a lot, and I know I've seen some of the ancient documents. Where you see one of my favorite astrology is Bonatti. He wrote the Book of Astronomy. Again, same time period, right in the 1100s. And astrology in the West really seemed to peak out in its intellectual prowess right around the 1100s. Definitely it started around 400 AD, maybe a little sooner, where there was the House of Wisdom. The Arabian emperors all saw the validity and utility and profound knowledge that was being lost with the destruction of ancient Egypt and many other wars and countries. And they created something called the House of Wisdom, where they employed these scholars to come in and translate all this stuff out of the old Coptic, the Greek, Aramaic, you name it, and put it into various different languages that these kings and queens were exceedingly interested in the medieval times. And I thought, wow, I said, that is interesting. And I have a lot of this stuff. It's stuff from Mashallah. In fact, Mashallah was a Jewish scholar, so was Saul, and they were totally anti-astrology. I don't want anything to do. That stuff's the work of the devil, right? And they started translating it because they were getting paid to translate it. And they went, wow, this is profound. This is really sacred knowledge. And they become the most staunch proponents of astrology, which kind of happened to me too. I didn't believe in astrology. My mother was telling me various different things and showing me various different things. And I just, after a while, went, wow, this is not a bunch of crap. This is really a science, an ancient science that's profound. And so I was kind of in the same boat. But anyways, yeah, I love this. Someone's mentioning Dark Side of the Moon. Well, that's an interesting, that's one of my favorite records, is Dark Side of the Moon. I'll never forget, I always mention, it's 1972, this record comes out. I'm sitting in front of the hi-fi with my friends, and one of them had just graduated the Berklee College of Music. He was a professor. And we all just looked at each other and said, who the hell wrote this? And again, Pink Floyd did this play on Dark Side of the Moon. It was actually about Syd Barrett. Syd Barrett was the guitar player who originally started Pink Floyd, or was involved with Pink Floyd. And he went into a mental institution from drugs. And I believe he died from an overdose, or became completely, his mind was completely shot from overdoses. And that whole record is an amalgam about him, and I think the insanity of the world. And I don't think any record has struck a chord in longevity with humanity as that one. That's kind of a Mona Lisa of these times. And when you listen to it, its lyrics, its words, and its themes all the way through, right up to the very end, is profound. And it's hats off to that one, I'll tell you that. And I don't think, as David Gilmour said, he said they never thought they'd ever equal that record. And they put out some great stuff, no question. And some of it's actually sold quite well. But I don't think anything's hit a chord with the world like Dark Side of the Moon. And it's ominous when you listen to it. It has an eerie energy of truth that's underlying in that. And that was actually a play that they had done, traveling around, a quadraphonic play. And this is 1971, 72. So amazing stuff. But yeah, I love that somebody mentions the Dark Side of the Moon, because it's clearly one of my favorite records. And, interestingly enough, talking about all these old astrologers, and then you hear a lot of stuff on today's internet about the moon in some way having a entrapment of the soul combined with Saturn. And if you look at Saturn's glyph, is the cross over the crescent of the moon. And there is a lot to that. Even the Sharia Gilgam, which is a text I mention a lot, that is quite profound, that talks about the lower conscious mind comes from the astral worlds. and very, very interesting stuff. And again, if anybody, this book I've been hearing from people is not easy to get anymore. Apparently, 32.org is not publishing it, or it got out of publication, but you can find certain versions of it on A-Books or eBay. So maybe they'll republish it again, but it's a shame that that book is now currently, from what I'm hearing, not available, because it talks about the reincarnational traits of the soul, what the conscious mind is, what the spirit is, what the karmic sheath is, and what the, you could say, wisdom of the soul's sheath is, and then the upper divinity, the 5 layers of the soul. Very magical stuff. And that's, again, a model that I couldn't believe, because, again, 40 something years ago, I'm building all these models that I use on the tree of life. And again, here, I'll show you, this is that diagram I show almost every podcast, but I'll show it again because it's a profound and I think really good way to look at things. And you can see here, let me go find that here. That's this one, not here, but it's somewhere way back there. We'll get one of them sooner or later here. Hold on. Is it this one? No. Boy, we're batting 1,000 here. Yeah, it is the tree somewhere here. Well, this tree right here certainly talks about the 5 layers that I was just talking about, which is, again, if you look here, it is the lower conscious mind and physical body. And I might be able to zoom in on this. Let me just see if I can get the controls here to work. Yeah, I can. So you'll see here as I zoom in on this, this is what we would refer to as our reality structures. I always say the lower conscious mind is our emotional perception of reality. Notice the eclipse points of the moon are on either side of what we would call our conscious lower mind. I like to call it the present personality. And I think that is a great phrase for our conscious mind because it is shapeable, it is totally programmable by ourselves, and also, if we're not aware, by the environment in which we're in. And this is a very interesting thing, is to control the mind. The Bhagavad Gita, the ancient texts, the Atma Bodha, the Vedas talk specifically about this, that if one does not step outside and control the lower conscious mind, much like we drive a car or control a horse with the reins, we will be at the effect of what we're programmed with. This is how mind control works. Well, anyways, as we zoom back out here, you'll notice the upper sephira on the tree of life, or these, I guess the better way would say the middle ones. And notice this is Mars, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and the sun, which is the spirit, you see, which drives the physical mechanisms in the lower conscious mind. But notice as we go up the ladder here, way up at the top here, above this big, thick dashed line, we have our little friend Saturn. And Saturn is the gatekeeper, so to speak, if you will, to this realm of planet Earth. And Saturn is the cross over the crescent of the moon, previously concretized energies that now become manifest through the conscious world of time and space. And that's what astrology really is about. It's the interaction of that on us in time and space. Time is not an illusion, in my opinion, because, you know, drop a brick on your foot, call me on the first of the month. It's definitely not an illusion. But I will say that time is a construct of the astronomy of this world. It's not us. And it's also not consistent from everything I've heard in quantum physics and everything else throughout the universe. If we were to live in a different place, or even if this planet were to change what they call its synodic cycle, that's a fancy word for sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight, and also its cycles around the bodies, meaning the moon and the earth and all that. I should say the sun, and of course, which affects our seasons. Well, Saturn, they say, is the gatekeeper outside of time, and it represents the karmic sheath on the physical body. So this is very interesting stuff. And that diagram that I was looking for, now we'll find it here. It's got to be in here someplace. Come out, wherever you are. Here it is. I just found it. So this is it. This is the one I show a lot, which also talks about divinity down into creation itself. And then this big, thick red line is the division to where spirit coalesces into the physical worlds. And boy, there's a lot of those physical worlds from everything that is in the ancient texts, as well as even evidence that's coming out. And again, you notice down here, this is what it says right here. I'm trying to expand this so people can see it. You can see 49 potential parallel universes, 49 subdimensions. Well, it's interesting in the Sharia Gilgam how they talk about the astral worlds, or what we would call the astral planes, is where the lower conscious mind keeps regurgitating in and out of. And the Sharia Gilgam talks about that. And there comes a point when consciousness and the dissipation of karma, which is what our soul roots are connected to, starts cracking and the reality structure starts coming in. And it's interesting because many texts, particularly Sharia Gilgam, speak about how that upper souls, or you could say our soul root, begins to break outside of the physical realms into what they call the Briatic worlds and the Yetziratic worlds. See, Yetzir is a strange word for the 6 dimensions of space, even though there's more than 6 dimensions. But they talk about forward, back, above, below, left, and right. See? So that's the 6 sides of space that the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of formation, talks about. See, you can see Yetzirah right there where I'm circling. And this is some deep stuff. And they actually say it's very demonically controlled. Isn't that interesting? We hear about reptilians, we hear about craft, all this stuff. Well, and some people talk about the cube of Satan, or they'll talk about the worship cults of Saturn. Isn't that interesting? So, and again, this is what entraps these people in these corridors of power and all these interesting things. And some of them are interesting, some of them are outright demonic. And literally, they get trapped down in these lower worlds. And if some get evil enough, they can actually lose their soul to the fallen spirits. And again, this is provable because everything in the physical worlds will be created, will get its genetic, or you could say physical sheath or garment is what it's referred to, for the spirit, psyche, and soul to experience in all different forms of life, and even the mineral kingdoms. And they will all grow, mature, experience atrophy, and die. And this is an interesting thing. And the physical worlds, they say, get destroyed every so many billions of years. The Vedas particularly speak about this as the yugas, and every approximately 4.3 billion years, they say this is all destroyed. So, and recreated. Isn't that interesting how the physicists run around and they say, yeah, well, creation seems to be only so old. Isn't that interesting? So a lot of deep stuff and a lot of fun things to talk about. By the way, if anybody ever wants to crack into a little bit of that stuff, this is a good copy of the Vedas. It has the Shamhitas. Notice there's the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the white and the black, the Sama, the Artha Vedas. I mean, the Vedas are profound. And I'd mentioned a while ago, there was some scholars, and I forget where they are. I got the book on the shelf back there somewhere, but they had done a comparative analysis between the Vedas and the Torah, which we would know as the Old Testament as well, right? And it was eerie. This has changed the names. It's the same story. Same story of the war in heaven, that, good and evil was combined to create the physical worlds of polarity. And this is an interesting stuff. So we always got to keep that in mind. We are just visitors here, just like an old Western. We're just passing through, right? These lies are just passing through. And what we lose in the, craziness of this world oftentimes is that perception and awareness of that. Remember, nobody's getting out of here with everything I got around them. Trust me. And I'm glad too, because I wouldn't want to take all this stuff with me. It's too much. It's like George Carlin said, where are you going to put all your stuff, right? Well, when I get out of here, I don't want even a knapsack. I just want to get out of here, right? And if I come back, then I'll come back, in a different way, right? So anyways, I got to run here because I got another appointment. But I appreciate everybody joining me. A lot of great comments here. Let me take a minute here and just look at what some of the people are saying here. Friday was a really bad day here in Chicago and was feeling super dizzy. Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to see that's this Uranus, Alcyon, as well as many other things. We got the Saturn, Neptune. These are the big background pictures. And clearly, we are seeing a shift here in new directions. And this is what Uranus does. Every 84 to 86 years, it goes around the solar system. And it always is the change grenade. And I can tell you that, we're going to see, a judge just agreed that Trump could get into National Guard. And I can tell you, I see the helicopters around here all the time. And we live way north of Los Angeles. So helicopters are around here all the time where somebody, they're picking some guy out of a bush or a tree or wherever the heck he is trying to escape. And a lot of robberies, a lot of trouble, a lot of people. I've heard some horror stories. I was just talking to a friend in Burbank last night where some of these people, they're going in and tying people up and getting them to sign stuff and threatening to, do torture to them. It's pretty crazy. So again, if you turn on the Mind Control News, they'll tell you, well, everything's just fine, right? But talk to some people in the trenches and, there's always been crime, but I will say it's much, much harder to deny that now than I think at any time before. So anyways, I'm just grabbing a couple of, someone says here, could you share your soul map, please? I took a screenshot from the last video and it's hard to zoom in and read. Well, I don't know which one you're talking about. Probably the one with the person. I don't know. But yeah, these are actually custom diagrams that I put together. Yeah, I could, but they're kind of a work in process, and I'm actually working on a book right now that's quite interesting about interrogation, astrology, consciousness, and interaction thereof, and why this was such a formidable tool. The Egyptians actually had a book called Search of the Heart. It was translated by Professor Dykes out of the University of Minnesota with the Uranian Trust. Great book. I have it, and it parallels a lot of other books that I have that they actually knew. In fact, in India, the ancient astrologers would, as someone would approach the astrologer for a question, they just cast a chart. They just cast a chart. Why? Because they knew this person had something on their mind. And that chart actually allowed them to see into the potentials of what was going on and what ailed them or what they were coming for. And again, it's not trying to read anybody's mind. It's not trying to predict the future. It's trying to help somebody, in their situation. And I do that all the time. Every reading, I cast what we call a session chart, or I call it a session chart, but it's actually seeing into, okay, what's the situation for this particular person, and really, really interesting stuff. But yeah, sharing these diagrams, I don't know which one you mean. First off, I'll try and pay attention to my comments, but they're pretty large files because I make them in this old program that's actually about 30 years old called Micrographics. And I just never taken it out of that. I guess I could put it into layers in Photoshop. I haven't done that, but they're pretty hefty files. So it's not something I can email or link it to. But yeah, they're definitely custom. You can again, the Sharia Gilgum, if you can get that, is got some of those diagrams. They're different than that, but the Sharia Gilgum does have maps in there about the soul's layers, the 5 layers of the soul. And interestingly enough, they're all the tree of life, just like what I'm doing. And the planetary systems are actually in us. We're a mirror of that in these genetic meat suits, at least. So Very fascinating stuff. But yeah, I wish I could share it, but they're pretty heavy. Someone says, do you see riots November 1st due to EBT and SNAP being pauses? I don't know. I do. I think we could see trouble here coming up. And I think we're definitely going to see it next summer with the midterms. They're definitely going to start to do that. Yeah, I'd have to cast a chart. I'm out of time right now. I only got about 2 or 3 minutes left and I got to roll. But yeah. Oh, how much methylene blue do I take? Well, it's different for everyone. It depends on your body weight. There's some really good doctors and also pharmacists out there you can consult with. Don't take it if you're on other meds. Be careful combining meds. Check with a doctor if you're on any meds. But some people start out at like 4 drops in water and drink it in a straw, or your teeth will be blue. My tongue still gets blue. But I actually take about 10 to 12 drops, but I'm more acclimated. And there's been a lot of reports, and you can jump on the internet, a lot of doctors talking about this stuff, how it oxygenates the brain. In fact, if you get carbon monoxide poisoning and you go to an emergency room, that's the go-to thing. They actually give you an IV of methylene blue in your arm for carbon monoxide poisoning because it oxygenates the blood and the brain. Well, what I found too is they also found back, I think it was in the, I forget when it was discovered. You can look on the internet if I'm wrong on the dates, but I think it was in the late 1800s. They found it cured malaria. How about that? Viral things. And that's what really helped me. It really helped knock it out. I mean, I've never had anything quite like this. I mean, I couldn't walk across a room straight. I was wiped out. It's like somebody hit me with some directed energy weapon or something, but it was strong. And what's so cool is the methylene blue. I also found wormwood, walnut hull, and cloves helped tremendously. Isn't that interesting? And, some folks will say even nicotine knocks out these spike proteins. So clearly some weird stuff sliding around. And I've heard this from different people. So you got to be careful combining all this stuff, but quite profound. And again, reflexology, I was on that a lot too. So it brought me back to life here, which is good. And again, you got to play around with your body weight, because I'm probably about 225, something like that. So I actually just lost 5 pounds, but you got to be careful. If your body weight's lower, start low. And I would recommend, jumping on the internet or getting some professional advice before you just dive in headlong. But there's been a lot of reports that this also really helps dementia, and conscious self-awareness is improved. They say it gives clarity to the brain. Again, that might be due to the oxygenation. So a lot of people are talking here about methylene blue, and it's really come online by storm here. And again, it's in liquid form. You can buy it right on Amazon. I call it Amazon, but yeah. Someone is saying here, I heard the government shutdown was in part so NASA doesn't have to release the photos of what's going on 3i Atlas. I heard that rumor too. I can tell you this is going to get very heated. And again, if this government shutdown goes past 61 days, all the axing that's been going on with Trump and his void there, it's going to go into permanency. And Trump actually said that this is actually giving him what he wanted that he didn't have power to do when Congress was in session. So very interesting what's going to happen. And when I first cast the interrogation on this, it was fixed signs rising, and I cast another one today. Moon going to a conjunction of Mars. How's that sound to you? You don't have to know much about astrology, but that sounds like this is going to get much more heated, much more angry, much more heated. So we'll see what happens. It'll resolve, but it has to, or they'll come up with other ways to short circuit around this. How that will be, I don't know. But anyways, a lot of folks are coming up with some good stuff. Oh, said you need an update on Ella. Well, that's interesting. Ella, I guess I can say this. I don't want her to get mad at me, but she's had some really difficult transits, and it's been really hard on her. And it's getting better slowly but surely. So she's really coming back to health here. But it's been a blur. And I can't believe how accurate the astrology has been on that. Again, here, I'll show you this. This is medical astrology. If you can see that here, see medical, look what he says here. He says, this is a book, critical translation on elections, which is picking auspicious times to get married, buy, sell, real estate, etc. Also, the book on interrogations, which is, again, horary, Prashna astrology. And last but not least, the book on the luminaries, but it's also got medical astrology in here. So yeah, you can see up here at the top title, it says medical astrology. And again, that's something my mother turned me on, which I thought was just profound, where she was a specialist. She was an RN specialist in hemodialysis later on, and started talking about, because I always had chronic fatigue. I got perforated quite, my first waltz with the vaccines was back in the 60s, and I actually passed out from it. I got chronic fatigue really bad. And my chart is a little bit for that too. I've got Saturn on the moon, which is Lord of my ascendant. And plain English is I have a sensitivity to things that are very, very strong. And it was quite profound, some of the things she shed light on with medical astrology. And this is transits that we're all going through, progressions, etc. And these things can have a profound effect on your energy, your health, and your strength. So pretty interesting stuff. And I've had a lot of conversations with doctors, particularly the ones in the healing fields that have, jumped over from the allopathic world into the naturopathic worlds and healing worlds. And fascinating correlations here between what we see in the progressions, transits, and doshas. Like just follow Mars alone, which goes around your chart every 2 years. Amazing. I mean, I've seen the strongest of the strong get weak and tired and lethargic when that Mars goes in the 6th or the 12th house. When it hits the ascendant, Popeye on spinach, right? Or you get really empowered. So very interesting stuff. And when you have outer transits and progressions that are exacerbating things, it can be good too. You can also see when you're really going to become Popeye on spinach, or, when you're going to get knocked down. So it's very interesting stuff to watch. And especially in elder people, really powerful. And that's where we can flank it, alter, and suggest different things you can try to compensate for that energy. Reflexology, certainly one of them. And, people that are on meds, they can talk to their doctor and get your medication adjusted, right? So cool stuff. Anyways, the last question I'll look at here, someone says, Saturn is the stern leader getting things done. Neptune is the spiritual hippie. It is the powerful time to accomplish goals towards justice and freedom. Well, that's one way of looking at it. You bet. And I really think that's actually not a bad analogy, because Neptune is probably one of the most interesting planets to look at. Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are very interesting. They're known as the transcendentals, meaning they're outside of Saturn. And that's what many of the traditional astrologers had kind of coined that phrase. And I think that's a very accurate one too, because they don't rule mundane things. They're very much about major changes in society. And we have this Neptune-Saturn conjunction happening in February, which is exceedingly powerful. And again, to the siderealists, I find the tropical zodiac is very profound. Here, I actually had a little picture of this here, if I can find it here. I don't know what happened to it. Yeah, it was actually on the screen share, but it was the Egyptian so-called zodiac, which is so different than the Vedic divisional charts in Vargas. And it's an enigma how you can have these completely different separate systems, even Chinese astrology. I mean, when you look at how all these systems developed, and yet there's accuracy in every one of them if you stick within the lines on the road in those systems. Absolutely amazing. And the Egyptian zodiac, which is what I call, or the Chaldean, was very sophisticated. It had triplicity lords, it had bound lords, it had decadent lords. And you'll find similar things in the Vedic astrology, but they use Vargas and divisional charts, which are taking the signs into many different divisions. And it's astounding how accurate it all is. And it's an enigma how it all exists both in the tropical and sidereal. And what made me bring that up is when you look at the ancient mundane astrology, which is about the world, what's happening in the world, society, wars, all this stuff, right? Floods and earthquakes and you name it, lions and tigers and bears, all that stuff, right? So the bottom line was the tropical zodiac was a go-to zodiac. And what was most profound is they always said when planets conjoin in the first bound, that means the first 5 degrees, they're called the uneven bounds by the Egyptians. And some people call them terms. The later astrologers like Lilly referred to them as terms. But what's so profound about this is when you had conjunctions like Saturn and Neptune are about to do in February, in the very first degree of Aries in a tropical system, that hasn't happened for thousands upon thousands of years. Some say up to 26,000 years it hasn't happened. So this is some profound times of change that we're living in right now. So this is, and again, the Uranus crossing over the Pleiades again, and Alcyon particularly, is never going to be the same as it was back, World War I and Civil War and Revolutionary and before that, because you can never get everything to be at the same place in the sidereal zodiacs twice. It can't happen. So I've got to run here. And someone's last thing they're saying, when you are sick, it's important to sanitize your toothbrush daily, and even regular mouthwash with alcohol will work. Yeah, actually, I've actually been putting hydrogen peroxide in my ears, and I let it bubble for about 2-3 minutes and then dump it out. And then I put some herbs in there. So that's it helps clean the whole sinus tract too. Yeah, but that's right. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of things to sanitize. Electromedicine is really cool too, where you put square wave pulsars on your wrist. So, all right, everyone. Make sure you try and join us this Sunday. I'm going to have Michael Schreck there, really an interesting guy that will bring some cool stuff to the table. And you want to check out his book too. It's amazing. So we'll see you Sunday. And you guys have a great week. Remember, we're in the first quarter of the moon. This is a time to plant seeds and things grow. It's a good time to come up with new ideas and plant them, because that's our monthly growth cycle of the most powerful thing, the moon. Okay, you all take care, and we'll see you soon.